Today on the 167, we talk pride and we attempt our best Russian accent. Welcome to the 167. Hey, welcome back to the 167. I am here joined by my compatriots, the ones, the onlys, Rick George.
Top of the morning to you.
And Jacob Reeves.
Brother Jacob here.
Brother Jacob.
I'm
just going to tell you which Jake that I want this podcast.
Brother Jacob will be in the field today. And so,
there you go.
Brother Jacob's here. You could have different personalities.
Yeah.
I think that would really add
people
some
can
splash.
see how terrible I am at like doing accents. And
I'm terrible.
It'll drift.
Yeah.
Penny will yell at me if I try to do accents when I'm reading books to her.
My kids do that.
She'd be like, I don't want accents. And I'm like, but it brings me joy. Stop it.
There's one particular book. It's called Princess Snowbell, and she's the princess of Frostovia. So it's like, Frostovia, you Princess Snowbell.
I do the Russian one as well.
Yeah, and like, it drives my kids bananas.
Yeah.
They hate it.
Yeah.
So one of these days we'll do a podcast in fake Russian
Just
accents.
for children.
Yeah.
Like, this one's for your kids.
Welcome to the 167. I don't know what accent that is.
I don't either. It didn't sound Russian, but whatever. If it makes you feel good, that's good.
All right. Well, today we are coming after we've concluded our series about say goodbye. And this last week we were talking about saying goodbye to pride with a capital P.
Yes.
And saying hello to
humility.
I loved it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed preparing. The whole series, was enjoyable to dig in and kind of flesh some things out. And obviously lots of things that you couldn't really unpack, just not enough time. But yeah, overall, lots of positive comments, and it was, I think, a beneficial and enjoyable series. So, yep.
I refuse to give any compliments because I'm not going to help pride grow at all.
That's right. I am not going to build you up because I do not want you to get puffed
If I
up.
don't say that it's bad, just assume that I think it's great. Well, I think there's a lot to that because, with pride, it's always a tricky thing where, like if you ask somebody like, what sin do you struggle with? Be like, I'm pretty good. I'm like, oh, so it's pride.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of a default setting for us, I think, a lot of times. But we talked about this a little bit. You talked about 3 different types of pride. You talked about better than you pride. I'm holding myself to different standards. I can handle it pride. I don't need anybody's help. And it doesn't apply to me pride. So I don't think that this is really a question of do people struggle with pride. It's more of a which pride do they struggle with. So of those 3, I want you to make me a case. What do you think of those 3 that people struggle with the most?
It's like closing your eyes and throwing a dart at a dartboard, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like that. You see it so.
Honestly, I think it bounces around. I can point out specifics in my life, in your life, in your life. I can see it. I can, it's just it. I don't know.
But to not take the pastor middle ground like we always do.
Yeah. So
Can't take the middle ground.
So because we're on a church podcast, then we'll go kind of the spiritual, that number 2. I can handle it myself, right? So I see that all the time. People try to deal with whatever they're dealing with themselves, or somehow my, most of what happens in my life spiritually is because of me. I can do this. I don't need God. We don't say it exactly like that. It's just demonstrated in the way we live. So I would say from a church perspective, as a pastor, it's that I can handle it myself, pride.
I'm still shocked that this is a church podcast. Yeah. Did you guys know?
No, I didn't know that.
I thought this was a Fast and Furious fan club.
Right, and it's partly why church attendance is so, because I don't really need church. I don't need, I know what God's word says, but I can do this. I don't need, I'm good.
I can handle raising my kids.
I don't need to tithe because I don't really need God's blessing. I got a great job. It's I don't need to pray. I'm smart. I've worked hard. I know. just those kinds of things. It comes out in subtle ways in the way we live.
Well, I think one of the things that we have as a practice of a church, shameless plug at this point, because we're going to do child dedications coming up. So if you are listening to this and you have not dedicated your child and you want to, go get signed up.
It's this coming week, so
Yeah,
hustle.
it's this Sunday. Let's get it done. But
Unless you're listening to this,
a week,
after
after
4
February
days from
13th,
now, so then you'll miss
2002, in which case
check the podcast date. But one of the practices that we do on the regular is child dedication. And I think some of that is a good practice simply because of that. Like what you said, I don't need anybody's help raising my kids. And I'm like, I feel like people that say that don't have kids. You're like, everybody needs help raising your kids. And part of child dedication is something where we're coming up and saying, I have the humility to say, I need the help of the church. I need your help. If you see my kid running in the hall, if you see my kid doing something, I want you to help me.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example but as a church, like we're a fairly good-sized church. There should be just that openness and the relational connections that as a husband and wife of small children, you should never be at a place where you're like, well, we don't have babysitters, right? You have an entire church of people, grandparents, older, that you should be able to call on and say, hey, man, we need a night. We just need to get away. Any chance that, no one's ever called Trudy and I to say, hey, we just need to get away. Would you like to watch Penny or the? Well,
I was like, I have done that before.
Yeah,
I was like, I've dropped Penny off at your house.
But
I have 4 children. It's a whole different ballgame.
Okay, so we have watched Penny.
You've heard it here first.
I was like, that maybe wasn't.
We have watched Penny, and we loved it.
She's also one kid.
Yeah, but
You've heard it here first. You can call the church office and schedule Pastor Rick to babysit your kids tonight.
But the reason people, I mean, I don't know, there's multiple levels, but yeah, it's really, we can deal with this. We don't need the church. We don't need the pastors. We don't need God. We can handle it ourselves. It's a level of pride.
The core of that is pride in the sense of going, like, when I hesitate, like if I'm going, I'll just call, Pastor Rick and Miss Trudy and see if they can come babysit the girls. I'm going, I would be so, if my girls misbehave, they're going to think I'm a bad, it's like, it's really,
we already think that.
I know. We're beyond that, you and I.
So I can handle it myself, I think, is the pride that probably plagues everyone. But so does the I'm better than you. We're better at covering that.
What do you think, Jake? If you got to pick it, that's the thing about having 3 choices. It has to be 33, 33, and 34%.
Oh, wow.
So what's the 34%?
See, I was taking the other. I think a lot of people sit in that doesn't apply to me.
Yeah.
Where a lot of people, and then it kind of shows up as ignorance, ambivalence, apathy, because it's like, that's not me, and but I think that's more low key.
Is that where the false humility would come into that doesn't apply to me? So you have this false humility where you're really proud, but you're pretending to be humble.
Yeah.
I'm the humblest man you've ever met.
Yeah, that's right. So, because that doesn't apply to me really, because I'm not proud. I mean, I just have a lot.
Well, do you think that people really think of themselves as prideful? I think it's easy to come into church and we point it and people go, "Oh yeah, I do struggle with pride." But on the regular basis, people sit around and think about my pride.
No, and that's partly why I said that it's so hard to, it's so devastating because it's hard to detect in your own life. Nobody, I shouldn't say nobody, not many people would say, yes, I'm a very proud, arrogant, egotistical person. We use other words. Right? I'm confident. I'm blessed. I mean, God has blessed me. I don't know why He hadn't blessed you in the same way. You got issues. I'm His favorite.
Well, and I think it's interesting.
God is particularly fond of me.
Right. I think it's interesting to look at culture and see how they have to do that, where it's like, like the body positivity movement and stuff like that. I'm going, there are good things about that, but it's really an attempt to not have shame or, like that, like not feel condemnation for something in your life, but at the same time, you're doing it almost like through something physical and not, like Jesus takes my sins away, but it's like I have to find a different thing, and it's almost that I have to take pride in my flaws, because.
Yeah.
Right.
But
Yeah, I mean, pride's a tricky thing.
I feel like now I have to make a case for the third one, which is that I'm better than you. But I
I was
don't know.
like, go for it. I mean,
The people that do that are terrible people. I'm just kidding. No,
I-
I think that's just a comparison game.
yeah.
And like you said, I think that crops up the minute that I feel insecure. I think that my default setting is to go, well, yeah, my hair might look stupid today, but not as dumb as,
I know,
like,
that's something, and you hear it all the time. But I'm not like that person, or I'm not. We compare.
Yeah.
We absolutely do all the time.
but I think that that's important because I think if I really look at that, it points out what I am insecure about.
Yeah.
Like, why do I have to do that to somebody else?
So you got to build yourself up, have pride in one area to overshadow another area that you're deficient in.
Yeah, and I want to take a little bit of a tangent here. I know we have some questions that we're kind of going for, but because it's come up several times. How do we then differentiate between, like you said, and we see this in the church all the time. People come up and they go, "Hey, you did a great job with that, that song. You had a great, message today. You do that," and people go, "Oh, no. I mean, like,
yeah.
I can't take a compliment because,
Yeah.
if I go, I did do a good job of that," they're like, "Oh, that's prideful."
Yeah. So again, the cutting room floor stuff that you just don't have enough time to plow through and to. I guess I would have liked to have spent more time talking about what humility looks like, right? So humility is not, and you've heard this, you've heard it. Humility is not thinking less of yourself, right? Humility is not saying, "Oh no, I am not that gifted of a singer. It is just Jesus." Like it's all Jesus.
Anything you see in me is Jesus.
Yeah. If it's just Jesus, then anybody can sing because it's just Jesus, right?
Yeah.
It's his voice. He doesn't change. So just throw any old person up there and it's going to sound great. No, like you did an awesome job, and it's okay to say thank you. Like I've worked hard at that. I'm blessed. I've been gifted in that, but I've put a lot of effort into it, but thank you for recognizing that. It means a lot to me that you noticed that. And, like to try to downplay it then is to think less of ourselves. And that's not what humility is. Humility is thinking of yourself less. Like it's not always building myself. Oh, look at me. It's me. I, look, I'm up here. La, la. It's like, no, I'm not thinking of myself all the time. But when someone acknowledges, hey, that was a great song. That was a great sermon. The way you handled that situation, that was incredible, to say, thank you.
Yeah.
Like I'm glad you I put a lot of effort into making sure that, and that's fine.
Yeah, I think we're all used to that haggle, though, at the end of it, where it's like, he did a great job. Oh, no, I mean, I messed up at this and that, like.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Hey, is that a new shirt? I bought it on clearance. It's really nothing. It's like somehow we have to try to, I don't know, apologize for something that you're wearing, a car that you're driving, a place that you went. It's like, no, just say, thanks for acknowledging that. I'm not putting it out there for everybody, but you noticed, and yeah, it's an awesome thing.
Well, I love that healthy, like you said, it's like, oh, I get a compliment. Thank you. Now I turn my focus on somebody else. Like one of the things that has been commented on to me that seems weird is like a lot of my guy friends at church, like we have this really positive vibe where it's like, my friend Brandon will come in. I told him this the other day, like he came in and we were in the lobby and he come up and he gave me a big hug. And I was like, "Hey buddy, how you doing?" And gave him a big hug. I'm like, "Man, you smell incredible. What is that?" And we were just joking about it. And, other people are looking at us like, "What?" I'm like, "What? He smells great."
He does smell good.
He smells amazing.
I can concur.
He says it's patchouli in his laundry, and then like
I was like, I have half of that, and I don't I have patchouli in my laundry, but
What's
I don't
patchouli?
Smell like Brandon. I don't know. It's
Like a spice. Like
It-
you go in your kitchen and throw a little
I don't think you
cayenne
want to
pepper
eat
and-
patchouli.
No.
it is. It's like laundry seasoning. That's how I'm
Basically.
gonna.
For the longest time, it's just pretty much what a hippie smelled like. But
But yeah, it's like it's some kind of soap, like natural soap. And so
Yeah.
like he puts that in his laundry, and then he told me the cologne that he was wearing, and I was like, man, that's just amazing. And it's just like we just sat there and had this, little conversation, and he's like, well, thanks, man, and like that's really positive and
Yeah.
affirming. And then he just went on his date, and he felt better, and I'm going, and then like, or he'll look at me and be like, oh, I love, oh, your boots are looking great, something like that. And it's just like just really positive and affirming things for people. And if you just are in that mode where you're just exchanging that currency and not like going, oh, I don't know. I mean, like it's such a better positive vibe.
Well, now I feel bad because, like, no one's ever said I smelled good or that my boots look nice. Or
Your boots smell good.
Well,
yeah,
listen,
that has never been said.
you and I don't hug very often. So if you want to hug, I'll sniff your neck while we're hugging, and then.
Honestly, I would be more into it. Like, that is not, yeah, but whatever.
And this was the episode that
Yeah.
the podcast finally reached its end.
We didn't reach number 50. Sorry.
Listen, pride is when you're secure enough to sniff someone else's neck and turn the attention onto them.
Yeah,
Get
whatever.
that in a t-shirt.
We better get back on track.
All right. Well, let me ask you this. One of the verses that we were talking about is where it talks about that God opposes the proud.
Yeah.
So, like, what do you guys think theologically? What does that mean that God opposes the proud? Like, the minute that I'm in my pride, God's like, I'm going to smack you down and, like, spoil the
so-
milk in your cereal.
Yeah, so so when you break that down, so that God resists the proud or is opposed to the proud, here's a good visual. If you're watching, then you'll get the visual.
You can find us on YouTube.
Yeah,
you
if you're just listening.
I'll describe his hands for you.
Yeah, you'll have to describe. So technically that verse, so he resists or is opposed, that is a war kind of mentality. It is an adversarial, it's not like a covert, kind of non-confrontational. It is very confrontational. So we look at that and say God is opposed, like putting our hand out. He's opposing us, resisting us, kind of pushing us back a little bit. No, you can't come near me because you have pride. That is not technically what that is. So again, if you're just listening, like a police officer standing in an intersection holding his hand out to say, stop, I'm opposing you. But broken down, it really means like an adversary. We're fighting. It's like dukes up, fists. Like God is at war with pride. He opposes in a kind of adversarial way. So it's
You
like
say, like, God tases the prideful.
kind of. So we
God is pepper spraying.
but we have this idea that God's like, well, I'm just not real fond of that. No, he is an adversary. He is coming against pride to fight that. You can't bring pride because God's got his dukes up. He's like, come on, I will. That's kind of the word picture.
Yeah.
A little more clarity to that. So it is a bigger deal than we make it out. Oh, well, God's just like, I don't really like that. No, he's at war with it.
So how do you think that shakes out, like, practically, like, everyday life? Like, how can we recognize when that's happening for us? What do you think, Jake?
Recognizing opposition from
From
and
God.
pride. Well, it's really you are being antithetical, or you're not lining up with the character of God, because that's one of the things that you see most throughout Scripture. Is again, you said what's the theology on that? And you see this constantly being paired in something called parallelism with
Is that like a parallelogram?
yeah, basically, with the humble being lifted. And so what you're really seeing is the writers of Scripture, whether it's Old Testament Psalms or you go to, like, I was looking at the Magnificat, Mary's Prayer, and it is a clear declaration of God's character. And children want to be like their dad. And so when you are not in line with your dad, you're going to feel it. You're going to, and that's like, it's really what you get to a larger layout of creation, and the fact that while creation broke at the fall, there is a clear current when you're in line with what God is doing, and there's a clear jaggedness. I don't know. I'm using very creative language here. That's,
Yeah.
you know,
No.
that like when you step out of that flow, when you step out of becoming more Christ-like, then, you know, practically, like it gets harder. like emotionally, it gets harder because you're gonna feel more lonely. We're always walking the line back and forth on prosperity gospel stuff. But when you disconnect from the Father, you start to see more struggles in your finances because you're not reflecting Him.
Okay, so just think back to the 3 different types of pride. So the I can handle it myself pride. So pride comes in. Then you hear people all the time saying, I don't feel as close to God as I once did. You know why? Pride. I can handle it myself. I don't. But it's when you're humble and you're broken, you're like, I need God at this, and you're just pursuing Him because you can't handle it. And you're like, man, I felt so close to God in that time. It's because you were humble enough to come before Him and say, I need you. People who don't need Him oftentimes feel like, we've kind of drifted away. Like, I don't have a quiet time like I used to, and I don't hear God's voice. So it's that same thing, that flow when you're walking in humility and in relation, and that jaggedness when pride comes in and you feel a little disconnected.
Yeah.
Well, I think about, there's this show that my kids and I were watching one time, and there's this guy who's like the master swordsman, and somebody wants to be trained. And the guy comes in and he says, let me guess, you're the best swordsman in your village. And and the kid goes, no, I don't think I'm worthy. I'm just here. This is probably a waste of your time, and I'm really sorry. But I would be really honored if you would teach me. And the guy's like, this kid, when he'd come in there, like, this guy refuses every student. And he's like, no, this kid, because I can mold him. Like, he's willing to learn. Yeah. And I think that about where, even with my own children, where it's like you said, they come in and they're proud or they're prideful. And I'm going to put stuff in your life to go, you don't realize, like, I can just stop helping you. Like, even if I don't even have to resist you. I can just stop helping you and you can't live your life, and it's like, let alone when I start to kind of devise ways of getting your attention. And I'm like, you're just hoping for that, it's not malicious. It's just, I'm hoping for you to snap out of this.
That's a super practical. I mean, you talk about just even in the church world, like, as we're looking to raise up leaders in the church, who are the people that are easy to, raise up underneath you? Mm-hmm. The humble. It's the people that are like, I know how to do this. Get out of my way. That it's like, I know, it's like if somebody came on and they're the best singer ever and they know they're the best singer ever. And I'm like, hey, it's so much harder to mold them than somebody who is coming up and they've got a good voice, but they're battling insecurity.
Yeah. They've got raw potential.
But there's raw potential. I'm like, I'll take that raw potential person who on day one is kind of like, everyone's kind of wincing while they're leading, than the person who comes in and just shreds, and I'm constantly fighting them on every
so
thing.
The stage at church is a kind of a battleground. And so with pride, and it's a tricky place, and it's because you want people to be able to exercise their giftings, and you absolutely want incredible musicians, that play.
Yeah.
You want people who, vocally are spot on. You want those things, but because, of that creative element and the artistic people, there's that constant kind of walking the fine line of pride and humility, right? And I heard years ago, I think it was at the C3 conference, I don't remember, but one of the speakers said something like, as soon as pride walks onto a stage, God walks off of it. And we want God on the stage, right? We want quality people. We want incredible vocalists. But we want humility more than we want excellence.
Well, and I'm always like watching the scriptures, and the scriptures, have these great images in them where it talks about how God's the potter and we're the clay, and you picture this like,
the potter,
I am the clay.
Sorry,
but I mean, like, literally, it's like, would you rather be this soft lump that God's gonna tenderly like shape you, ghost, like where's my Unchained Melody?
Oh yeah.
Like God's gonna come and shape this person and like shape you, and like you're going, okay, this is fine, it's smooth, he's doing this, and it's like that's great. Or it's like, God, I am this hardened piece of rock, and he's gonna take a chisel to you. Yeah, like to do that. I'm going, and so
Hey, there is your imagery for God opposing the proud. I mean, you're getting chiseled away at
Right.
where
Rather
the
than
humble just
Yeah.
gets shaped. I mean, there you go, man.
Yeah.
So in that, how do we, this is the last kind of question I want to wrap on, is what are some behaviors, thoughts, like some of the things that we can do to stay that soft clay, that we can stay, moldable? What are some practices that we can do?
To continually pursue Jesus, who is our example, and just watch the way he walked in humility, okay, and how he exercised authority. So he had authority. He was the man.
Yeah.
But he walked in humility. Yeah. So what can we learn in that endeavor?
Well, and he said, I have my Father's authority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you just look at him and how he interacted with people, and then try to reflect that. And then for me, one of the things that I constantly do is to assess, whatever I'm thinking and feeling and how I'm living life. Not just am I reflecting Jesus, but am I reflecting myself and elevating myself to a place, because I don't want to be, I don't want to live through that pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't want to go through a period of destruction and falling because I puffed myself up. I want to make sure that, hey, if I'm saying some things, I want to make sure that, okay, maybe what I said did paint me in a good light. Okay. How far am I going to push that? And why am I doing that? And is it for God's glory ultimately, or am I just not feeling good and I'm like, hey, look at me, I'm building myself up? And because when that happens, you're gonna fall.
Well, I like the phrase, which is what is it? It's better to underpromise and overdeliver than to overpromise and underdeliver.
Yeah. So, so all those, the cutting room floor stuff that I looked through, that was one of them. Pride goes before destruction. That proverb is like, man, and we've seen people in our lives. I've seen it in my life where, and then it's like, I don't want that to happen.
You touched on this briefly, though, in your message, and it's been funny because, like I said, in our life group, we've been going through that Jenny Allen study, the Get Out of Your Head, and it's been almost lockstep with what you're talking about. But we talked a lot about gratitude and, like, basically saying, like, before we go, oh, I'm so great, it's like going, I've been blessed with much. Like holding gratitude, I think, especially like we talked about that with my kids and stuff like that. And for me, is going not I'm so great, but I'm so blessed that people invested in me that I could have these skills, like, and really having that sense. I feel like that keeps you in humility, is to have a good sense of, what God is doing for you and what has been done for you, not because nobody made it all by themselves.
No, and that's again, something that I try to constantly remind myself that on my own, I'm not like nothing. Like I've accomplished very little. Like it's not just about me. It's about the people that God has put in my path. It's about God's blessing. The cars I drive, the home I live in, the positions that I have. It's not because I'm that great. It's because of God's blessing and the people in my life and who's gone before me. And it's part of the reason I had the older people stand up, just to recognize their sacrifices and the blessing that they are in our church family, but also to let the younger people see that, man, these are people that have paved the way. Yeah. Like we have what we have because of the people who have gone before us, not because we're so awesome. It's because of all the sacrifices of people, and we need to honor them, and we need to recognize them.
Well, we got to wrap, but we want to let you guys know that next week we are going to be at C3 Conference, so we're not going to have a podcast next week, but we'll be back the week after with the 167. We will see you guys then. Hey, welcome back to the 167. We're here with 7 Minute Stories with my good friend Mike.
Hi, Lucas.
How you doing?
I'm doing good.
All right. So 7-minute stories is where we get to talk about whatever we want for 7 minutes. So it could be your life story. It could be something cool that God's doing in your life. So we got a fun one today.
Yeah. You were actually the first one to tell me about this was a thing. I didn't even know that a home blessing or praying over a home was a thing. And so where did you hear about it from?
Well, one of the things that's been kind of a thing, like people will move in, they'll call the church and be like, hey, will you come pray over our house? Just to make sure, like sometimes you never know what went on in the house before you. This real estate market, it's hot, but like you never know who you're buying a house from. And so, this was early on when I got here. So this is like a 7-minute story. Early on when I got here, the men's group here, a woman had called the church and said, my kid is freaking out. It's like he's talking to something in his bedroom. We feel like there's something evil in our house. And so Pastor Rick, being Pastor Rick's like, we'll roll over there after men's group. He saddles up 20 guys on motorcycles and trucks.
Literally saddled. That's great.
And they like roll into this neighborhood and they're like, like she's like peeking out her window like, what the, like this is not what I signed up for. And these big, gruff guys get off their motorcycles and they come, they start praying over the house. They surround the house. They just start praying and saying, if there's anything evil here, it has to leave. And, just praying for the kiddo and praying in his room and just kind of filling that house with the presence of the Holy Spirit, with the presence of the Lord. And so,
we have promises, right? I mean, we have promises like Psalm 91:10 that no evil will befall us, no plague will come nigh our dwelling. And so theoretically, they can kind of give you a force field, if you want to use those Star Wars terms, over the house. And so you're the first person I heard about that. And so
you got Job where Satan, the accuser comes before God and says, well, the only reason that he likes you is because you put a hedge around him. Like that hedge is a really consistent symbol in the Old Testament, especially that when you're obeying God, you're in his presence, you're in his righteousness, that there's this hedge of protection around you. And so both in a spiritual sense, mobily around you, but, also kind of in your territory.
Sure. And I think this has kind of all just been a progression over the past really 2 years, but specifically the past year and even more specifically the past 2 months, I've had my spiritual eyes opened. And so I've been hearing, when people are telling me things, I'm hearing it differently than I used to. And so Nicole, my wife, had met a guy at the polling place, and it was kind of this awkward silence there. And she asked him about his tattoos, and then just floodgates open, right?
That's always a good opener.
It's a great one. And so just starts talking about his life and everything like that. And so anyways, him and I went to coffee, and we've kept up, and I've sent him some podcasts and some different things over the course of our talking, but nothing any more in depth than that. Had him come to New Life a couple times, and I felt like he was struggling, and he was kind of throwing a life, preserver out there to him, and he was taking it, but he still wasn't ready to kind of dive all in. And so anyways, what's happened is he kind of reached out about a month ago and said, hey, sorry, I've been distant. I feel like we've been under a spiritual attack here lately. My wife is now in the hospital. She's possibly going to die. There was just all these things going on, and he was saying things that it was just kind of, I didn't hear before. Like I've been under attack over the past couple weeks. Whenever I go in the house, especially now that she's not here, I just kind of get the chills.
It's incredible how much freaky stuff people will put up with in their house, just thinking like, oh, that's just it comes with the house.
Yeah. I love the fact, more and more I hear these stories too, I love the fact that we built our house. Like anything freaky, we put it there. I can cast it out. But so we went, and I was just talking to him. He said something, kind of the clincher is he said something to the effect of, especially around midnight, the house just feels heavy. And so, I'm like, okay, well, even if it's nothing, like we can go do this. And so I'd never done it before. And so why not saddle up 8 people.
Saddle up your horse.
I cannot sing, actually. Do a lot of things I cannot sing. But so we went over there, and you have, again, the same situation where, and I told him I appreciated his bravery. I mean, in the end, he's kind of a private person. He lives in a small house, and then just to have 8 people roll up and start praying on it is not normal. It doesn't happen all the time. But
There's not a lot of Ghostbusters ministries out there.
no, there was not. Don't cross the streams.
Don't cross the streams.
I really thought about putting that on the group text as we were going over there, but I didn't want to.
What are we doing? We're going to pray. Don't cross the streams.
I didn't want to try to being serious in some of that stuff because it is serious. In the end, this is something that I found out was a thing, and we need to go out and step out in faith.
Yeah.
In the end, we can go in our prayer closets, we can pray a lot, or we can do what the Bible told us to do.
Let's go take ground.
Absolutely. We're in a spiritual warfare, and so just all those things were just kind of going through my mind and just stepping out, not really knowing what we're doing. So I reached out to you. I reached out to a friend of mine, and his name's Asher, and he was in a different town. Just people I know that had experience with this, just for a couple of prayers. Like, how do you go in and pray? That was important, just to have the right verbiage and then share that with the group, because I don't think anybody of the 8 people had ever done this before either. And so it's a great experience for all of us, but you want to go in, thinking the right authority thoughts, thinking the right, prayers to pray, to put that hedge around the house.
Yeah. God's truth, the scriptures. I mean, that's where Jesus confronts Satan, and what he combats him with is scripture.
Right.
He combats him with prayer and that confidence.
Yeah, it was, it is written. It is written. Actually, there was a 1920s healer, and I use this a lot. I find myself using it a lot, is, Father, you said this.
Yeah, we're just going to claim that promise.
Yep, we believe that. You said that no plague can come nigh our dwelling. We thank you for that. So anyways, we go there, and before, on the way there, I was getting some of these prayers. Asher had said something interesting in a text. And he's like, I'm getting a word from the Lord that it's, check the corners. And then I'm getting it upstairs or something high. It might not even be a 2-story house, just something high. So we go over there and we prepare, pray over ourselves, pray over the homeowner, and we go in. And I was feeling drawn to talk to him because I knew this was kind of a jarring experience. And so I'm sitting here ministering to him. And then, we kind of broke up in threes, and people were going room to room. Well, it was interesting because in the garage is where the hatch to the
attic
is. Yeah, thank you. The hatch to the attic was, and 3 different people in the group, some of the more, I would say, spiritually sensitive, and so like Adam and Brandon and Derek, George, they 3 independently got the same feeling about the same corner in that garage as they were going through. And so Derek actually gets up on a ladder and starts getting up there and kind of getting aggressive, praying in tongues, casting it out. If there's any unclean spirits, you must leave in the name of Jesus. You cannot come back, things like that. And so it was kind of fun to just be in that environment where you're taking ground, to use your phrase.
Yeah. It's almost like cornering a pest in the thing, where it's like you said, you identify, okay, this is the creepy corner. We're just going to soak it in praise. We're going to pray over it. We're going to, just like I said, kind of take that ground back and say, Lord, you're going to do your work here.
Exactly. And
you guys identified a few things, 'cause I think this is important for people too. People can bring bad stuff into their home, where it's like, I think there was a couple of witchcraft items, and there were some things that were,
like a true Native American dream catcher, and people don't realize that's just something harmless, and maybe it can be, but if you think about what the original purpose of a dream catcher was, it was to catch spirits, right? And so that is something that Rich Brown specifically had a bad feeling about. And they also had multiple flags in the house, and they all look kind of similar, but for some reason one gave 3 or 4 of the guys the willies.
the heebie-jeebies.
The heebie-jeebies.
So then you said that guy, he ended up burning that stuff, and he said that when he did that, like, the crazy stuff happened, like...
Immediately, he said, he actually texted me. I hadn't even left Edgerton yet, which, Edgerton, doesn't take long to get to the city limits. And so I hadn't even got out of the city limits yet, and he had texted me and showed me a picture of the fire. He was burning that, and said, I immediately felt a sense of relief. And so what was interesting is his wife was given, and so to kind of wrap all this up, his wife was given 2 weeks to live, and they were really, they said that was the most that she would live. At best, 2 weeks. She was going downhill fast, and that happened the day before. We went over and prayed over this house. The other thing was interesting, and Derek George had he's had farming experience, and so he kind of said this in passing, and I didn't think much of it, but he mentioned it multiple times that the plants just didn't look healthy in the house and around the house, and he said, I just don't think they're growing. They're kind of being hindered by this negative spiritual energy, if that's what you want to call it. And so anyways, that next day, the homeowner calls me, and we were talking, and I hadn't told him anything about what Derek had said about the plants. And he's told me two things I thought were pretty amazing. And again, to the non-believer, they could be rationalized away. But we all know that these are not coincidences, right? And so he said, first things first, she's out of ICU.
That's
Literally
awesome.
2 days after she had been basically pronounced a death sentence, she comes out of ICU. Still not out of the woods yet, but talking and eating solid food, all that's a big step. And the second thing is she had planted these flowers in the front of the house and had waited 2 years for them to bloom. They bloomed for the first time that morning.
Yeah.
So all you need to say.
I love it. Like I said, we were talking in another 7-minute story about how I love when God will send you a physical sign to talk about spiritual healing. Like sometimes people are, it's like when Jesus Christ sits with the guy and he says, what's easier to tell you your sins are forgiven or to stand up and walk? You have people that experience pain in their body. They deal with unforgiveness and the pain dissipates. And it's that physical confirmation of something that's a spiritual truth. I always love when God does that.
Yeah, I think that next steps is he's still dealing with a little bit of he calls it head junk. And so I think the next step is to, do some inner healing and maybe lay some hands on him. But,
Renew
in the
his
end,
mind.
yeah, we've had just doing those things up front and stepping out in faith has, I think, given us permission to take those next steps. So it's just awesome to be a part of what God's doing.
I saw him here on Sunday. Like I said, I think that's great. So I love that. Like I said, that's one of those things about Christianity. You're like, yeah, it's kind of weird. Like you go over and pray over somebody's house, but like it ministers to them and they end up finding Christ. Like, let's do it.
Well, we shouldn't look like the world. So thanks for your guidance and help with it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks for sharing. This has been 7-Minute Stories. See you guys next time. If you enjoyed this episode of the 167, make sure you like, subscribe, follow, get notified, leave a 5-star rating and a positive review. Tell all your friends to listen as well. Make sure you go over to newlifegardener.com and check out all that we have to offer as a church and check out our messages online as well. Thanks for listening.